And good morning to you, and happy Father's Day also. It is interesting that on Mother's Day, our attendance skyrockets. And on Father's Day, many people are out there in nature. So I'm so grateful that you are here today so that we can talk about love, which is the topic this morning. We've been spending this year celebrating 100 years of teaching the science of mind. That's the name of our teaching. We're using the date 1918 to start our celebration from because that is the date our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, wrote his very first book, Creative Mind. It's difficult to say when a movement actually starts, but we know that's when his first instrument of teaching came into being in the form of the publication of Creative Mind. So we're using this book of his, Living the Science of Mind, to choose our topics each week this year. And our topic this week is your spiritual bank account, which is a wonderful idea. And I'm going to begin by reading the meditation that appears at the end of the essay for this week. Now, during our founder's time, Dr. Ernest Holmes' time, the word meditation was thought of a little differently to how we think of it today. When he used the word meditation, what he meant was quite simply contemplation, thinking about something. It's a very satisfying and easy way to practice meditation. You just sit with the meaning of each word or the whole passage, if you like. Indeed, it's sometimes thought of as passage meditation. It's particularly useful when your mind is disturbed or when you're super busy and your thinking's going all over the place, or you're worried about something because you give your mind something to do. It's like the story of the elephants in India who lead the procession on festival days through the villages to the temple. And the elephants are usually decorated quite beautifully, and on the back of the elephant is an image of the Lord, and then all the devotees follow behind the elephant as they go to the temple. The problem is that the elephant's very curious about all the little stalls on either side of the narrow streets, and there goes the tusk to take a banana over there and a mango over there, very much like our minds going all over the place. So the trainers of the elephants give the elephant a baton to hold in their trunk. And then the elephant becomes fascinated with the baton and studies it carefully, and now it is safe to go through the village to the temple. So that's what we do. We give our mind something to concentrate on. Concentrate doesn't mean to intend force or effort. It means to circle down into the middle of. In other words, examine. Just notice what comes up as I examine this phrase or this passage. What feelings emerge. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm not trying to get something out of the passage. I'm watching and I'm letting it emerge and come up. So here's the meditation at the end of the chapter on your spiritual bank account. Believing that God is all the presence there is, I'm learning to feel this presence in everything and in everyone. Dwelling on the thought that God is love, I permit my mind to become filled with the consciousness of this love. I permit this love to envelop everything and everyone that enters into my thought atmosphere, and it brings with it a sense of peace and joy and certainty. Realizing that God is life, I open my whole thought to such a complete inflowing of this life, this divine life, that I see it, I feel it, the one perfect life which is God. I see it and I feel it in people, in nature, in animals. I see it and I feel it animating every action and sustaining every movement. And my faith in it is positive and certain. Knowing that all things are possible to faith, I say to my own mind, be not afraid. Your way is being made certain. Your faith in life is preparing the way. Believing that God is in everyone, I meet this God in every person who comes before me, and I feel my oneness with them. Knowing that God is peace, I open my mind to the quiet influence and the calm certainty of this inner peace. Knowing that God is joy, I meet every situation in life with joy. I am committing my life to that power within, to which all things are possible. Now that's one way of making a deposit in your spiritual bank account. Through contemplation of texts that lift you up and inspire you. There are other ways, random or planned acts of kindness, giving compliments, charitable giving, serving others through your time. There are a number of different ways. It's the metaphor that's in this chapter this week, your spiritual bank account. And it's fairly simple. It's basically this idea that you're going to need to make some deposits so that you can take some withdrawals out. You know, you can't just be a taker in life. We were talking about that yesterday at the Spirituality of Happiness retreat. We talked about the idea that in life, I can't decide that I'm just going to breathe in. At some point, I'm going to have to do the mirror image. There's a reciprocity in this life, and there's a give and a take. And importantly, he says in this chapter that the coin, the currency in this bank, this spiritual bank, is love. It's not anything else. It's not how hard you work at your spirituality. It's not who you've studied with and what books you've read. It's not what terminology of spirituality you know better than somebody else. It's not how many hours you've put into this practice or that practice. No. It's love. That's the currency of this bank, and that's what you want to get rich in. It's not about the technique, it's about the heart feeling of love. Because you know how it is, how we can start to think you got to work hard at your spirituality. You know, how we want to get to enlightenment quickly, and the easiest route. There's a story of a man who goes to visit a guru who's very well known for helping people attain enlightenment. And he says to the guru, this man says to the guru, how long will it take for me to be enlightened if I meditate 2 hours every day? And the guru thinks about it and says, 5 years. And the man is not happy with the answer. And he says, all right, then, how long will it take if I meditate 4 hours? And the guru says, 20 years. You see, because it's not the effort. In other words, whatever spiritual practice you're engaged in, whether that's saying affirmations, reciting mantras, doing affirmative prayer, meditating, contemplating, selfless service to the world, charitable giving, spiritual study, whatever it is, if the foundation is love, you're making a deposit. Ka-ching. You know, in other words, one moment of genuine love fills up my bank account more than any kind of effort. This feeling of warmth, acceptance, embodiment, belonging, joy. That's what fills up your spiritual bank account. And he says on page 233, this is good. I even put it on a slide for you. And here is one of the great secrets of nature. The person who has taken the time to harmonize themselves with love will find that when some incident that seems hateful or discordant arises in their experience, that they can draw on a reserve force which now they have. They can actually apply this reserve force to the situation when it arises. You know, that's what a reserve account is, a prudent reserve. We were talking about that last week. Something that you can draw upon when you need it, when the unexpected happens. I have a friend who's been saving up a prudent reserve because he was saving up because he wanted to travel the world. He had bucket list experiences that he wanted to accomplish. And then a friend of his on the East Coast became very ill. And he said to me, you know, I realize now that's why I was saving. I was saving up so I had that reserve to be able to draw upon to fulfill something that had a heart connection to me. I thought about that. That's absolutely right, you know. And he goes on, Ernest Holmes goes on to say, if you have accumulated a certain amount of love and then meet some situation where discord and strife seem to enter, get quiet inside and say to yourself, and I put this on the slide because I want to memorize this. This is so good. Say to yourself, I am bringing love to bear on this situation, a love which comprehends and includes everything, a love which has no hurt in it, a love which is not afraid, a love which is calm and confident and sure of itself. Oh, I want to say that when things rise up in my face and trouble me. That's how you make a withdrawal. He says right here is where the law of mind in action comes into play. We've been talking about spiritual laws in past months. He says this is how it comes into action when you and I apply our thought of love directly to discordant situations. And there is nothing in you which is afraid. And your thought of love applied to that situation transforms it. If you have deposited enough love in your checking account, you will find that you can meet any situation and your check will be honored. But the bank of life and the situation that confronts you will be transformed. Oh my goodness. I understand that. You know, when my love bank is full, it's very hard to knock me off my center. When my love bank is full, other people's stress doesn't get into me. When my love bank is full, the world doesn't become more complicated than what it is. I like that. And yet, there are times when it feels like I am overdrawn. You know what that is? You know, that's that moment when you show up at the spiritual ATM. You put in your card that says insufficient funds. You know that? Oh my goodness, blinking at you, insufficient funds. And then anything can upset me. Then the slightest little thing can trouble me. I don't have anything to draw upon. You know, how does a person get there? Well, I don't know about you, but I know how I get to empty. It's when I let my priorities get all messed up. You know, and that's when I let neglect creep in, neglect of my practice of saving, because I get so busy that I let other things rise in priority so that they crowd out the very things that bring me spiritual health and wellness. We have a staff prayer at 3 o'clock on Monday and Tuesday and Sunday, Wednesdays. My turn is to facilitate Tuesdays, 3 o'clock. That's my gig. And then Tuesdays come along and I can just feel I'm so busy. And I don't have time for this. I remember the words spoken to me at my ordination. The ordaining minister said, "And may I remind you that a minister who is too busy to pray is far busier than God ever intended." Oh, and I let my priorities get shifted around, or get up in the morning, and sometimes Kevin will say to me, "Shouldn't we have a little family affirmative prayer?" And I feel the indignation of it and start to recite to him righteously and accurately all of the things that I need to attend to. And the next thing I know, I'm running on fumes. It's an empty tank. Have you ever got there? To the bottom. Nothing to draw on. I know what happens for me then. Then I have to make a loan. Yeah? And get an advance. Because you can do that. Do you know that you can actually borrow from people who are already prayed up? And it's a no-interest loan. You don't even have to pay it back. That's how wonderful it is. The way that works is you go to somebody who's already prayed up, like the prayer practitioners who are in the chapel after service, waiting for people to come and make loans. They pour their love out because they're all prayed up. Or you can do it online prayer request, www.cslsr.org. Say what you want, and then they pour their love in, No interest, no need to pay back, and you get filled up. I mean, that is possible, but don't you know, you and I, we can't keep on living on loans. At some point, I'm going to have to make a plan and start my own savings. Some point, because things happen. And even if you do have a full bank account, don't you know that things still happen? Things happen to kind people, prayed up people. Things happen to people who have made love a priority. Things happen that can have the effect of emptying a bank account overnight. I'm thinking about the fires we had, for example, Those fires were indiscriminate. They didn't say, "I'm going to only affect people who haven't made deposits." No, it was everybody, anybody. Didn't pick certain people. Good people, kind-hearted people, loving people had the experience. Some of them were like suddenly their entire spiritual account was emptied. One of our own members of our community who lost everything told me, she said, I found myself questioning everything I believe. And if it were not for the kindness of perfect strangers that helped, I may have lost my way. But through their example, I started to recreate my spiritual center. And I realized through their kindness that although I had lost things physically, that spiritually I was intact. Oh my God. Another one of our members lost everything too, absolutely everything. And she realized what she wanted most of all, and she called us and asked for it, was the Science of Mind magazine mailed to her. Because if you know the Science of Mind magazine, it has a meditation like the one we started with this morning for every day of the month. And she wanted that because she wanted to start rebuilding her center, her spiritual center. Oh, that's something, in moments of emptiness and stress, to revert to the practice and not abandon it. It made me think about when Hurricane Katrina happened. I trust that there were a good deal of kind and wonderful and loving people who had accumulated all kinds of love in their spiritual bank accounts who found themselves in shock and loss. There is a Unity Church in New Orleans. Now, Unity is a very close cousin to Centers for Spiritual Living. And this Unity Church, after the hurricane, had substantial damage. And attendance and revenue plummeted, obviously, because people couldn't get there. And they were in danger of losing everything. Now, I can imagine in that situation how a person or a community could lose confidence and courage. And we didn't know them. They didn't know us. But out of our desire to help, we looked for New Thought communities that had been affected, and we found them, and we just started sending money to them. And then one day we received the most beautiful and gracious thank you letter. It was so beautiful. Everybody that was still associated with it, everybody signed it. And the thing that really stood out for me was this line in the letter where they wrote, "We have shared these blessings that we've received from you, continuing our tithing practice." And I went, wow. Because in the midst of loss, the temptation sometimes is to contract and hold on, but they did the opposite. They reverted to their practice, they gave thanks, and they paid a portion forward of what they had received, because that's what tithing is, to give a portion of the good you received, and they gave it not knowing where their next dollar would come from. Oh my goodness. Even though they didn't know from where their good would come, they knew that it was important to keep their hearts open and to stay in the circulation, to keep replenishing their spiritual bank account. That's something to learn. You and I, we don't know where our good will come from. Maybe it's none of our business. And often it doesn't come from the place where we think it should come. The most important thing I think I got from this letter was, don't quit just because you've run to empty, because there are other resources, other tanks that you did not create that you can draw upon. You see, because all of this deposit and withdrawal, it can start you to think it's all up to you. It's not. It's not all up to you. Listen to this on page 233. Why can't we think of life in this way? Why can't we think of it this way? That God has already made an initial deposit, and it's a big one. And it's for everyone who is ever born into this world, because God has given itself to us. It has imparted its own life, and in a mysterious way, which is beyond our comprehension, has endowed us with the capacity to love. And that is a deposit you cannot deplete, that you did not create, that stays permanently accessible to you. You, me, we have the capacity to love. It's about all we do have when it comes down to it. We don't always use it. Remembering again ministerial graduation, the presiding minister charged us saying, I charge you to love the people you don't like. So I'd never forgotten that. Whew. I have the capacity to love no matter what. Can I use it? You see, because I don't think we're here on this planet, you and I, to accomplish a specific task that is a puzzle hidden in meaning. I don't think so. And personally, I don't think we're even here to prove anything. We're certainly not here to own things. And personally, I don't think we're even here to learn lessons. That freaks me out. I don't think we're here to gain skills or advantages or insights. And I certainly do not believe that we are here to suffer through life to prove that we can make it. I think, if anything, we're here to be who we really are. Love. To let it in and to let it out. If anything, if I have a mission, I would say that my mission then is to remove all of the reasons that I've collected along the way in my mind for why I think I am not loved, not lovable. And every time I get rid of one of those reasons in my thinking, I can feel the energizing power that comes when I'm a little bit more of my true self, when I let myself be love. Ka-ching. Deposit made. There are many things in life that will make me happy for the short term. And I really believe that the only thing that brings lasting joy is love. The times we loved, the people we loved, the beings we loved, the love we received, the love we cherished. You know, when people are asked what do they regret most as their years advance. In fact, Forbes did an article on it in 2012, a list of 25 things that people say that they regret. And as I read through the list, there were things such like regret working too hard, too much at the expense of relationships and friendships. Not taking a stand in the face of prejudice and injustice. Not staying in touch with acquaintances, friends, and loved ones. Spending too much time in front of a screen so it separates me from friends. And as I read through the list, they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying exactly the same thing. All the regrets point to one thing: regret of not loving enough, of not being kind enough, of not being decent enough with self and with others. And so I don't want to hold on too tightly to the things that stand between me and my capacity to love. You know, like resentments, jealousy, being right, ancient wounds, bad habits, whatever they are. He says on page 235, you and I, we must have spent much time with ourselves straightening out all the little animosities and resolving them into the one great love, which is God. God never fails, and love never fails. And you will never fail when you use the love that God is. Oh. That act of straightening things out in my thinking so that love can come through. You know, I've noticed that every time I straighten out my thinking a little bit by healing an ancient wound, by accomplishing a small forgiveness, by releasing a resentment, every time I do that, it's making a deposit, but I get double credit for it. Because I've noticed that it seems that these acts, these difficult acts, it seems to release as much love into my spiritual bank account as is equal to the difficulty it took to straighten out my thinking. That's why it's worth it. Straighten it out. So I want to read to you a prayer that I think sums it all up. And I invite you to breathe in and to exhale as your eyes close. And imagine that these words emerge from the heart center of your being. As a voice within says, in your own consciousness, I am a perfect candidate for love because it is natural for me to love. And my heart is open. So open that I determine I am ready for a new experience of expressing that love. I accept that I am created in the image and in the likeness of God, which is love. So I call myself love on earth. I realize then that's why I'm here. To love. To be love. To express love, to receive love, to let go and to love, and to love again and again and again. And I declare that is my life's purpose, and I get in sync with it. Through these words today, I'm becoming more willing to accept who I am, more willing to forgive than I've ever been, more willing to soften into my true nature than I've ever known how. And I remember, I am a perfect candidate for love because I am made in the image and likeness of that one supreme love, which is God. And together we say, and so it is.